Take a risk. Greetings, hello, happy Sunday to everyone out there. As always, we start by wishing and hoping that you are maintaining your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual health to the best of your capacity and to the extent of your dreams that you're able to do that. And we are glad to have you here today for this very important topic, Pan-Africanism versus the so-called American descendants of slaves, or ADOS phenomenon. If you consider yourself a Pan-Africanist, of course you're in the correct place. If you consider yourself a supporter of ADOS, you're certainly in the right place. If you're not even African, you're in the right place, especially if you yell out Black Lives Matter, because how are you going to really be that concerned about African lives and you don't even, understand the movements that are defining our existence on this planet today. So this is a good space. We're glad to have you here. And as always, we start by giving respect and honor to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, not the fake claimers of descendants to the Western Hemisphere, but the actual native people of this hemisphere, or if you would call the Indian people, the people who are native to this hemisphere, we give them respect and honor for the 528 years that we have been forced to reside on this part of the world, and their efforts to continue their fight to win back their land, because this land does belong to them. If you're not indigenous to the Western Hemisphere, if you're not American Indian, this is not your land. I don't care if you have lived here, born here your whole life. This is simply not your land, no less than something that has been stolen from you 10, 15, 20 years ago doesn't belong to the person, respectfully, who stole it. They're just a thief who has your property. So this is still indigenous land, and it will always be that until they get it back. And believe me, they are fighting for their land back. You may not know that, you may not be aware of it, but they are fighting for their land back. They're not fighting for casinos. They're not fighting for stores on the side of the road. They are fighting for this land base back in their possession. And we are committed to doing any and everything in our power to help them get it back. And also, of course, we give respect and honor to our African ancestors, the people who are the very reason why we are here today, breathing and existing. The African ancestors who fought for us from the eastern shores of the Indian Ocean in East Africa, all the way over to the western shores of the Pacific Ocean, out here on the west coast of the Western Hemisphere. They fought all through the Americas, Central, South, North America, and the Caribbean, through the middle passage of the Atlantic Ocean, all over the African continent, our people have fought. And if you can't name at least 5 or 6 successful, widespread African resistance efforts to colonization and slavery, that's the reason why we need to talk about this, because there's so much confusion out here. People wearing ridiculous shirts like I'm not my ancestors. What a disrespectful thing to say. Fool, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for your ancestors. Your ancestors fighting like they did is the reason you exist today. So we need to stop that nonsense, stop the division, and stop all that. So that's the reason why we're here to discuss this topic for today. And we're just so glad for all of you that have been able to join us. And we will start it as we always do, just quick introductions. I'm a Jamu, longtime organizer in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, done work for the party all over the world, and excited and happy to continue to do that until I do not have breath left in my body to do it. And joining me, as always, is my outstanding daughter, Shakura, who grew up in the All African People's Revolutionary Party's Young Pioneer Institute program. And now she is a graduate student working on her doctorate in communication public health. And where she lives on the other side of this plantation country, she is actively involved in activism work around African women's health issues, indigenous women's health issues. And I've had the honor to participate in a lot of the work that she's engaged in with pride and humility. So just honored to share this platform with her every week, and just thankful to have her in my life. And you should be thankful to have her in your life, because she brings clarity every week to this process. And again, just to talk briefly about who we are in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. This event every week is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And we are an independent, revolutionary, Pan-African political party based in Africa, a mass political party. Our objective is Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa, one unified socialist Africa. And if you want to know more about that, you can start with the book on the right, the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, which was written by our party's founder, Kwame Nkrumah, in Guinea-Conakry in 1968. And in that book, Nkrumah calls for all revolutionary Pan-African formations on the ground in Africa who believe in the objective of one unified socialist Africa to unite into one body. And so our work in the 50 years of our existence has been fulfilling the strategy that Nkrumah laid out in this book you see here, the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. And some of the organizations listed here are some of the organizations who do subscribe, who have at least elements within them that subscribe to our objective of one unified socialist Africa that we work with every day to bring about this worldwide united Pan-African fighting force. So if you don't know who the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, or what you call South Africa is, or the Azanian People's Organization, or the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau, the Democratic Party of Guinea, the Amilcar Cabral Ideological School in Nigeria, the Zimbabwe Movement for Pan-African Socialists, the Pan-African Union of Sierra Leone. If you don't know who those organizations are, they are the same as the All African People's Revolutionary Party. That's all you need to know for now. And we are fighting to bring about that capacity to liberate our mother, Africa, or as Nkrumah says, until Africa is free, no African anywhere on earth will be free. And since we understand we don't struggle in a vacuum, we constantly work to build principled relationships with other genuine liberation movements. The Filipino National Liberation Movement, check. The Irish Republican National Liberation Movement, check. The Palestinian movement against the Zionist occupation, so-called Israel, check. And of course, the struggle of the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. We are not xenophobic in our Pan-African struggle. We understand that the stronger the indigenous people get and the closer they get to regaining their land base here, the stronger our Pan-African efforts have to get. One cannot happen without the other, and vice versa. So we continue to build those ties and to unite to have a worldwide fighting force that's attacking this vicious, backward capitalist, imperialist system from the head down to the bottom of its toes. And so to get us started on our topic today, Pan-Africanism versus ADOS, I will do what we do every week and turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Daddy. Greetings, everyone. I hope you all are well. I tend to echo a lot of what my dad has already said, but I also try to have my own voice and my own words. And so when I tell you that I hope that you are finding some type of way to be settled and practicing what safety, mental health, and self-care and all those things, whatever that looks like for you in the midst of all the chaos and madness, I hope that you are finding a sustainable way to do that as long as you are not harming other individuals and as long as you are practicing self-respect as well as respect for others. I cherish you all being here with us. We thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that each weekend, like me, I hope you walk away with a stronger understanding of whatever the concept was that you may not have already understood. And I hope that makes you feel hungry enough to go out and seek more information, because that's one of the best tools you can have in your toolkit, is using your information to seek more information so that we can eventually overturn and deconstruct capitalism, because we're going to be organized and smart enough to be able to do that. Okay, so we start by talking definitively about Pan-Africanism because we are convinced that the confusion the capitalist system has created among African or Black people around our actual connection to Africa is the real reason behind the misinformation that characterizes this topic today. It is important to start by stating that Pan-Africanism is an objective that has been a concept for thousands of years. As our great revolutionary Pan-Africanist ideologue Sekou Touré correctly stated, Pan-Africanism is not a reaction to colonialism. It did not come about simply because we are oppressed. It is not a reaction to that oppression. Africa, like the rest of the world, was marching and evolving. If left alone, it would have achieved the unity of Africa and her people. What colonialism did was interrupt Africa's evolution. With the evolution of Africa interrupted, the need for revolution is required to continue Africa's forward progress. That revolutionary process is Pan-Africanism, the objective. The solution? One unified socialist Africa. No one anywhere is presenting a logical argument claiming that Pan-Africanism isn't a viable solution to the problems African people face in almost 120 countries worldwide. No argument against Pan-Africanism is being vague in English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Patois, Swahili, Arabic, Wolof, Akan, Zulu, Shona, Creole, or any language that African people speak anywhere. There is no argument because no argument exists. Pan-Africanism realized means that Africa's vast mineral and material resources, currently the riches which fuel and finance the international capitalist system, would no longer be controlled and exploited by capitalist entities. Instead, those riches would be utilized by Africa to serve the needs of the African masses. For example, instead of Africa's exclusive supply of cobalt being controlled and exploited by Apple, Samsung, Motorola, Sony, etc., it is utilized by Africa and African development and forward progress. Instead of African people being socialized as exploited, which means we only have the limited psychological and intellectual consciousness to be excited about getting the latest 5G cell phone, instead of understanding and recognizing that the entire electronics industry should and will be owned and controlled by the African masses. This is what Pan-Africanism is, and what it will do. Again, there is no logic argument against this. There is no better solution being offered for our problems. Nothing better is being offered for African people worldwide. Not even a better solution being offered to us just within the specific microstates we live in, like the US or Kenya, Brazil, etc. We know this is true. You know this is true, and the enemies of Africa and the African masses, the international capitalist classes of exploiting pirates, they know this to be true as well. This is why we have spent the last 500 years plus creating an institutional mechanism to ensure they could prevent us from realizing this reality the best way that they can by controlling our thought process and our understanding of the world that we live in. They use schools, institutions of worship, the media, and all forms of human existence to advance notions designed to keep us confused. So just to make sure you all are still with me, this is institutionalized and strategic to the point where there are processes in place to make sure that we do not understand that instead of being excited about getting the latest technology, because 9 times out of 10, whatever the resource is, whether it's rubber or diamonds or electronics to keep our devices powered, majority of those resources have some way come from Africa in some way, shape, or form. So Instead of us being excited about going out to advance those things and to get upgrades, what we need to think about is how much we really are connected to Africa, because those are our resources coming from our home, which is Africa. So there are processes in place to help eradicate that out of our brain, processes in place to make us forget that, processes in place to make sure that those two concepts are separated. And what we are asking you to do today is to consider that they actually are more connected and linked than they are separated. And be mindful that that's a part of that process of deconstructing all those years that they were teaching us these lies. So when we think about our enemies, they know this to be true as well. And we spent the last 500 years trying to deconstruct that module and recreate something that actually makes more sense because it's based on humane advances. And it's also allowing us to reorganize ourselves. That's why we don't care if you're from Miami or if you're from Jamaica or if you're from Kenya, because Pan-Africanism affects Africans everywhere, no matter where you were actually born, because we know that you still come from Africa. The results of this dysfunctional psychological and systemic assault against Africa has been the rejection of Africa by her children. Whether it's denial of Africa, the creation of fantasy concepts to explain away our connection to Africa, our opportunist exploits to permit a handful of the most manipulative among us to profit from our exploitation, all of these dysfunctional realities exist because of the need of the forces oppressing us to keep us from recognizing the one manifestation of our ability to cease the tragedy of 528 years of institutional oppression against the African masses, the exploitation of Africa, and our need to eliminate our confusion about our relationship to Africa so that we can claim her and stop this tragedy once and for all. And we also want to keep in mind that when we think about how this has affected us, the best way that we can think about this is to make sure that we, again, are thinking about how we were taught this in our schools. We were taught this at our places of worship, through the media, any form of human existence, any human exchange that we come in contact with, most likely this notion, this ideology has been taught to us. So Africa is poor. That was one of the lies that was taught. Africa is a loser. That's another one. No one should want anything to do with Africa. I just want you to really understand how embedded in your psychology, but also your physiology, this may be for you. And to start to really understand, especially when you know people who have been to Africa, what do they tell you they do? 9 times out of 10, they're not telling you they're going there because they're going to a conference or to advance the struggle of African people. 9 times out of 10, they're telling you they're going there to go on a safari. And we're also taught that people don't even live in Africa. Human life doesn't even exist there. Those are all lies. And I can honestly tell you, I was so excited and grateful to my parents for taking me not once, but twice. And that's so rare to meet an African who's actually been to Africa, but I was having the best time. My dad can tell you I went to some clubs and did other things that teenagers do when they're in another part of the world. And it was a great experience. So the point I'm making to you is it's okay to actually love who you are. And if you are African and you are listening to this, then it's okay for you to love that you come from Africa. And I would challenge you to do some more research on what that continent actually brings to your life in every way, shape, or form. Even if you live in America, you're still benefiting from Africa and her resources. And we need to acknowledge that and stop, stop alienating ourselves from her. Let's actually connect back to her and help her so that she can get free. Next slide. One of the manifestations of how this confusion against Africa is utilized against the African masses is this most recent manifestation called the American Descendants of Slaves, or ADOS. The so-called movement is so concocted by people who use social media channels like YouTube to cleverly capitalize on their knowledge that we have been ideologically separated from Africa, which is the point I just spoke to, and why we don't need to be separated. These people are largely funded by extreme right-wing reactionary forces who have a history of racism against the African and indigenous masses, projects half-truths and misinformation to project a lie that African people within the US have a specific relationship to the creation of wealth in this country, and that we should organize around to acquire some of that wealth back. The half-truth is that the wealth does belong to us, but the lie is that it is by us, we mean Africa in general and African people everywhere in particular. The wealth capitalism has accumulated was acquired by exploiting Africa and Africans everywhere. To try and separate to that just representing Africans within the US is like trying to say the sun you experience and enjoy in the US is the sole property of people in the US, when we know that the sun affects everyone everywhere. The misinformation being presented is that people behind this ADOS lie are concerned about uplifting the masses of African people in the US. Take Yvette Carnell, one of the leading spokespersons for this ADOS, has been a board representative for Federation of Immigration Reform, also known as FAIR, which is acknowledged as an anti-immigration tool for clear white supremacist forces. So when racist commentator Laura Ingram serves as an advisor to ADOS mouthpiece, Tariq Nasheed, this represents a classic example of how slaves being puppeteered by white supremacy. The talking points these ADOS people use, like reparations for African people, offer no concrete plan for any system of serious reparations, which means the real objective these people are seeking is the financial opportunism they are benefiting from by being spokespersons for right-wing entities, while also fleecing the African masses out of their hard-earned money because the masses genuinely want justice. So they are using those same lies that we talked about, were taught in schools, places of worship, in the community. Anytime humans have interaction, ADOS is using those same lies to sell the lies and to perpetuate them and to promote them, and taking advantage of the fact that all we want to do is be free, and we want to make sure that we are organized when we get free, and they're capitalizing on that. They're taking advantage of that. And we want to make sure that we are understanding that that is what's happening. All the more reason for us to understand all that Africa brings so that we can deconstruct some of those lies and think for ourselves and be critical about what information is being brought to us, especially how it is being brought to us. Because I mentioned the schools and places of worship, but we know that through media is another way those lies were fed to us. So the xenophobia this ADOS movement promotes by turning Africans in the US against Africans born outside of the US does nothing to benefit the African masses, but tons to advance the anti-immigrant agenda of racist white supremacy, the very people who back, guide, and fund this ADOS movement. Imagine the confusion. Africans in the US are now debating the movie roles that Africans born outside of the US are getting to play Africans in the US, and movies that are written, financed, and profited from and by racist white supremacist organizations and entities. Another way to think about this is understanding, I remember when I was little, my dad used to always tell me the difference between someone who was born in Kenya or Zimbabwe and myself is that their great-great-grandmother, great-great-great-great-great times 12 probably, ran right, and my great-great-great-great-great times 12 grandmother ran left. That's really the only difference. So again, it's dangerous when you don't know who you are and you don't know where you've come from, and you're not interested in learning who you are or where you come from. That's one of the most dangerous things you can perpetuate. And more importantly, you're doing capitalism's work for capitalism when you choose to not know who you are and where you come from. And part of understanding that if you are in fact African is understanding that you are connected to the continent and not being afraid of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Shukura. Thank you very much. And what I want to start with for my portion is to focus on what Shukura talked about, this innate hatred of Africa that has been programmed into us. And when I say us, I mean African people everywhere, even on the African continent, this hatred of Africa. And we've done plenty of workshops about that. You know, they're on YouTube. Encourage you to, you know, go to those and look at them, where we talk about that specific phenomenon. But it's just important to start with that, because the actual issue here is that you bring me somebody who's African, who's saying they're not African, and I'll show you someone who has done zero study on Africa. I have encountered countless number of these people who claim that they've always been indigenous to the Western Hemisphere. Africans in America are separate from Africans other places, blah, blah, blah. And not one of them I've ever met who has any kind of comprehensive analysis, study, and understanding of Africa. And so if you have not engaged in an effort to educate yourself about Africa, then what that tells us is that there's no other option except for you to be inundated with the anti-Africa propaganda that defines the capitalist system. And so all you're gonna know about Africa is what random people tell you. I get that all the time. Well, I know somebody from Nigeria. Okay, well, I know somebody from Sacramento. I live in Sacramento. Somebody right next door that doesn't know anything about what's happening in Sacramento. So just because you know somebody from Nigeria, that doesn't mean that they know anything about what's happening in Nigeria. I mean, you can't be serious with that kind of foolish logic. And if I tell you that I've been to Nigeria, which I have, then based on your logic, then that means I must everything I say about Nigeria must be correct, which obviously that's insane. The only thing that can really fortify our understanding is intense and organized study. And so that's important. It's important to remember that. Anybody saying anything reactionary about Africa, you'll find someone who knows absolutely nothing about Africa. And as Kwame Ture used to be fond of saying, any African who studies Africa will be proud to be an African. I offer absolutely no disrespect to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. They have a wonderful history and culture, but I don't want to be indigenous to this Western Hemisphere. I am proud and honored to be an African. Even though I'm displaced, even though I'm on this plantation, I'm trying to figure out how to burn this plantation down and get back home and build up Africa. I am so proud of Africa. So we know this to be true. And this picture here is just an illustration of that. So this picture I took a couple of years ago myself when I was in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. And as you can see in the picture, and this is for, those of you listening who they don't want us in Africa. They don't like us in Africa. My friend from Nigeria told me they don't want, okay. If you, again, the slightest study, just walking down the street in Dar es Salaam, this is a common sight. And you can see here in this picture on the barbershop, who's that? Nelly, Ice Cube, Grant Hill, the ex-basketball player, Chris Brown, Diddy. This is common all throughout Africa, you all. And if you think about it, it makes sense because there are no Africans anywhere in the world who are more visible to the world than Africans in the US. Hollywood is still the primary propagator of images in the entire world. And so this is how people interpret the world. So Africans everywhere on earth want to be connected to Africans here in the US because they think, because of the reactionary propaganda, they think the US is the winner. So this concept that, they don't want to be connected to me. I mean, this is something that only exists in our minds here in this backward country. And if we want to understand like dismantling this backward agenda of the so-called ADOS, Descendants of American Slaves movement, this is the foundation from which we attack that. Because they say that their whole thing is about achieving reparations. And we have to understand something about reparations. First, you cannot understand the reparations movement if all you know about it is what you've seen on these YouTube videos produced by these clowns and buffoons. If you want to really understand the reparations movement, you have to study the people who have been engaged in serious struggle around this issue for the last 5-6 decades. Groups like in Cobra, for example. If you don't know who that is and you're talking about reparations, you're really doing yourself and everybody you're talking to a serious disservice. Okay, so a serious discussion about reparations can never be separated from our struggle to gain our liberation from the capitalist system. Like, we can't be talking about sitting down and negotiating payments with the people that enslave and oppress us. That's an insult to the dignity of our ancestors to even suggest something like that. We can't be, there's no negotiation. We don't negotiate with terrorists. We have to tie any discussion about reparations to our liberation struggle, and any serious discussion about reparations has to be tied to Africa's upliftment. Anybody talking about any payments to any individuals, that's just opportunistic capitalist exploitation. That's all that is in blackface. That's all that is. Anything that's talking about anything else, any money changing hands, and it's talking and not talking about uplifting Africa, which is the center of this discussion, is opportunism, is nothing but opportunism. Then next, this question of xenophobia. Question of xenophobia, and the question of if you're not familiar, xenophobia is like a fear and an ignorance of people who you interpret as different from you, people from different cultures, different experiences. And so this xenophobia that's being promoted by these Africans and this so-called ADOS movement, who are criticizing, as Shakur mentioned, the Africans who are in these movies. We don't control any of these. I don't care. I mean, and just the fact that that it can happen speaks to the insanity of the argument. You know, and talking about Africans in Africa never did anything to fight against the colonizers, and that's the reason we're in the Western Hemisphere. I mean, that is, anybody that says anything like that, and if you believe something like that, or you hear somebody say that, again, I challenge you. You're not someone, or whoever says that is not someone who has done any study on Africa whatsoever, none whatsoever. Because if you have, there's no way you could make such an ignorant statement. There's so much material out here that can educate you about how much we fought back. C.L.R. James has a book called Pan-African Slave Revolts that talks extensively about dozens of slave revolts, of revolts in Africa through the Bakongo region, the Wolof, the Fulani people, in Ghana, the Labodi people, who the British wouldn't mess with because they fought them back so viciously against colonialism. All of these folks fought, and the only thing you know about is Amistad, and if the European capitalist system hadn't made a movie, you wouldn't even know about that. So this is a question of our ignorance about who we are, and we haven't studied. There's no logic, no truth to this assertion that Africans in other parts of the world have not fought, did not fight to stop colonialism and slavery from happening. That's absolutely insane. And I'm sorry, but don't be within swinging distance of me saying that kind of stuff, because I can't promise you what my reaction will be, because you're being completely disrespectful to our people who gave up everything. And all you have to do is go to those slave dungeons in Ghana, in Cape Coast, Ghana, or in Gorée Island, Senegal. I've been to all of them, and you can feel the suffering that our people experience in fighting back against the colonizers. So anybody saying that, they just don't know what they're talking about. And then, you know, again, the reason why this is a problem is because of, again, the lack of political education about African history. And this is a challenge to you all. Like, you can't be talking about Black Lives Matter and you don't know anything about the Pan-African movement. You don't know anything about the history of resistance in Africa. You know, the Black Lives Matter movement is nothing but a continuation of all these things I just got through talking about. And the reason why it's a continuation is because whether we know it or not, it doesn't matter that we've been here 528 years. We're still Africans in America. And just you standing around talking about these Fools Wednesday at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. Well, if it would have been Black people, they would. Okay, well, who don't know that? And why is that? You know, stop just repeating parenting things and think things through. Like, why is that? Why is it different for us? The reason why it's different is because we're not Americans, and we never have been, and we never will be. So the minute we stand up for anything, we could stand up for a broken toenail, and it's going to bring the wrath of the state down on our backs, because anything we stand up for is a challenge to the status quo capitalist system. Those clowns that went there to DC the other day, they didn't even have enough sense to demand $2,000 instead of $600. At least they could have done that. They didn't even have sense enough to do that. They didn't even have a clear perspective. They pose no threat to the status quo. At worst, they pose a minor inconvenience to it, but they certainly don't pose any threat to the agenda. They're just as racist as the people that govern this country. They follow lock, stock, in line with those people. So that's why they get a different response. And so, you know, we've got to have political education and understand who we are as African people. We keep trying to compare our experience to everybody else in this society, and that's why we keep coming up short. The reason why we're in the situation we're in is because this society was built on our backs, and it's maintained today on exploiting Africa. This society is not maintained by exploiting Europe. So if you're trying to compare us to them, you're always going to be confused. You have got to understand who you are and stop this Stockholm syndrome thing where we keep trying to do everything we can to integrate with our master. And that's what political education will help us do. Instead of this sickness that we've been carrying out for 528 years, trying to beg the master to accept us. The master ain't never going to accept us. And if you had dignity, you wouldn't want him to accept you. I don't want to be accepted by the master. I want to slit the master's throat. So political education, you all, is how we correct this problem. And with ADOS, they rely on the ignorance of our Pan-African history to further confuse us. Why? As Shakur stated, because they're not talking about a serious plan for reparations. There can't be any serious plan for reparations when you're talking about negotiating something with the people who cause our suffering. That's absolutely insane. So they're not trying to do that. What they are trying to do is exactly what they're doing: position themselves individually to gain financially by being mouthpieces for somebody else's white supremacist anti-immigrant agenda. Because when Africans here turn against Africans from other countries, we're advancing the agenda of anti-immigrant white supremacy. That's exactly what we're doing. It does nothing to help us. Well, they're taking our job. You didn't have a job, fool. They're not hiring us for any of these jobs. If you haven't figured that out after 528 years, we really at this stage don't know what to tell you. You don't have a job. There's no jobs for you. The cotton has been picked. So your employment opportunities in this society are over forever. And all you are to these people is in the way. That's why they treat us the way they do. And we got to come to understand that and stop living in this Disneyland fantasy world about who we are and what's happening to us in this society. And when we do that, we can become much better conscious about these snake oil salespeople, like these ADOS people who take advantage of our ignorance to advance themselves individually. They don't even have to present a cognitive agenda to us. We don't even require that. The bar is so low. So let's look at some contrasts between Pan-Africanism and ADOS. All right. So Pan-Africanism is, as we've said, and as hopefully you know, it's an international movement of African people everywhere that's designed to bring about unity around this concept of creating one unified socialist Africa, which we know to be the solution for all the problems African people face everywhere we are on earth. And if you want an example of that, look at China. Now, I give this example often and will continue to give it. When I was growing up, one time I was moving, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but I'm saying this to help you understand what we're talking about here. So when I was 11, I was trying to move a broken refrigerator through the place where we lived. And my grandmother, who I grew up with, she lived with us. She saw me doing it and she said, "Boy, you're not going to, excuse my language, you don't have a Chinaman's chance of moving that refrigerator." And that was a common phrase that was used by people 40, 50 years ago. And most of you have never heard that phrase today. Why don't you know that phrase? Because there was a Chinese revolution in 1949, and it has advanced the Chinese people and the Chinese nation to the point today where China is a world power. No matter what you think about them is irrelevant. They're a world power. And so because of that, if you saw a group of people, you don't know whether they're from Hong Kong or Beijing or Shanghai or San Francisco. But if you saw a group of them and they were of Chinese descent, you automatically remote control program to have respect for them, not because of them individually, because you don't even know them, but because of what China as a nation has accomplished. Now, we don't want to do it exactly like China has done it. We certainly have some struggles around China, particularly their role in Africa, but we definitely need to have what they have, because the reason why we get shot down in the street, the reason why we get disrespected is because we don't have that. And if you analyze it, and this is where the political education comes in again, if you analyze it, even if you look at Asian nations, they're not all viewed with respect. The Asian nations that have achieved accomplishment, quote unquote, in the world stage are viewed one way, and the Asian nations that, quote unquote, have not achieved that level of political and economic accomplishment, I say quote unquote, because we're talking about through capitalism's vision, because that's the vision that everybody uses, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, they're viewed differently. So you don't look at China, Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea the same way you look at Vietnam, Cambodia, and North Korea. And that's because of the reasons we're talking about. That's why we need one unified socialist Africa. It is our contribution to the world. We're not saying we need that and to hell with everyone else. We're saying that one unified socialist Africa gives African people everywhere our self-determination. And that's our contribution to the worldwide socialist movement leading to world communism. I know that's a lot. I know that's a lot for a lot of you all, but we have medicine for you. It's called political education to correct the dizziness you might be feeling right now. That's the medicine to correct that. So Pan-Africanism is simply the process to give us our self-determination. That's what it is. In comparison, ADOS as a movement is structured on dividing African people, turning African people against African people born in other places. That's does nothing to make us stronger. Not even those of us here in the US. You can't make any feasible argument about how that makes us stronger as a people. But it certainly makes the people advancing it stronger because, again, as we've said, they're operating based on other people's agendas, who are rewarding them for fulfilling their objectives. Because what these white supremacist forces want to do is force the African masses in this country to become xenophobic and anti-immigrant, because that serves their political objectives. It doesn't serve ours, it serves theirs. The immigrants are not taking your jobs no more than our ancestors who were freed from slavery were taking the jobs of white people. The immigrants aren't taking your job. You didn't have a job. You don't have no jobs here in this country. That's just the reality. So we don't need to be fulfilling anybody's white supremacist racist agenda. And that's what these people either wittingly or unwittingly are doing with the work that they're doing. And then finally, the real serious dishonest element of ADOS is that using our people's forward advancement, they're actually focused on opportunistic ways to advance themselves, as we said. And the logic, you all, it just is incomprehensible. As Shakura said, do you understand that today it is irrefutable that you have blood relatives who were born and raised in other countries that don't speak the language you speak? Because when the slave raiders went throughout Africa, and they went all through the African continent, stealing our ancestors, they didn't say, oh, wait, there's 5 of you. Are you all Fulani? Because we want to make sure, we're really committed to humanism here. We want to make sure that all the Fulani people stay together. Is that your mother, father, grandma? Okay, all of you. Okay, we want you all go get on that slave ship together. We got a shuttle to take you there. That's not how it happened, you all. They just grabbed us indiscriminately, violently, and brutally and took us, separating us from our family members. So if you understand that, then clearly we are scattered all over the world. You have relatives born in Cuba who speak Spanish only. You have relatives in Brazil who speak Portuguese or Creole. You have relatives in Nigeria who speak Igbo, who fought like hell to keep them from taking you, but were just not able to succeed at that time. But these are your blood relatives. So the logic of separating us based on where we're born does nothing to serve our interests as a people. All it does is serve the interests of the people and the agenda of the forces who are fighting to keep us oppressed. And the people advancing these notions don't care about that because they're getting paid. They are getting paid. Shakura already gave you one example. We can stay on all day talking about examples about the opportunism of the people promoting this ADOS concept. But it's not our job to give you all the information. We only have an hour. What we come to do is hopefully inspire you to go out and study it yourself, because you're not going to be able to refute what we're telling you because it's the truth. So you can study it yourself and find out for yourself and go get that yourself. And so that's what we encourage you to do. And if you do that, then you will find quickly what we're saying and understand why this is such a critical issue and why we're so fired up about it. So let's talk about back to this question of political education. And I know some of you like, dang, they're always talking about political education, but you don't understand, if you read propaganda, like one of the best analysis of propaganda, this is going to shock some of you all. One of the best analysis of propaganda I've ever read in my life was Adolf Hitler's book, Mein Kampf. Now, don't try to twist it around. Well, they're supporting Adolf Hitler. No, I study my enemies. I'm not like a lot of you all. I don't just think that it's a good strategy to be ignorant about the practices of my enemies. So I study them closely. So what Hitler said in his analysis of propaganda, he talked about the necessity of controlling the thoughts of people. And if you can control the thoughts, you control their actions. Or as Carter G. Woodson said in his classic work, The Miseducation of the Negro, if you tell the Negro often enough that he's supposed to come in the back door, you won't even have to tell him to go and he'll look for the back door himself. So this is why political education is so important, to disrupt that. And so about flow and progressive television commercials. It doesn't matter whether Progressive is your insurance company or not. You know about that because they constantly project that to you 24/7, 365 days a year. You know about Carl's Jr. because they constantly project that. You know about that young woman on the, what is it? I don't know if it's AT&T or whatever it is, commercials. You know about that because they're constantly projecting that to you. So we're combating that. So we have to constantly project our positive political education messages. So that message is that we have to engage organized political education. As long as we continue to pretend that being ignorant or that we know everything we need to know, because that's what we pretend, that we know everything we need to know. As long as we continue to do that and try to act like that's not an issue, you all, that is exactly the reason that we're in the situation we're in right now. And it's the reason why we will continue to be in the situation that we're in right now, because we are the only oppressed people who send our children to our enemies thinking that they're going to educate our children. We're the only people who rely on the news propaganda of our enemies as our primary information sources for how we're going to view the world. And then we wonder why we're so confused about everything. Well, the solution to that is we have to create our own independent mass political education. And we have that in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and we can help you get that. And this is not about, well, he's saying I got to join his organization. I don't want to join his organization because I'm capitalist, even though your bank account is more than likely overdrawn or close to it. We don't even get in that argument with you. But what we will say is that we say join any organization working for our people and working for justice. So If you don't want to join the All African People's Revolutionary Party, or if you're not African and you can't do that anyway, then you still need to start some organization working for justice, and we will help you, saying that publicly, say it every week. We will help you establish a political education process. Because think about it. Once we get the majority of people, even if we get 4 out of 10 people, 4 out of every 10 people to be involved in an organized political education process, we don't even have to get the majority, just 4 out of 10. You already know, just hearing that alone would raise the bar on political struggle in this society, in this world. Even if we just accomplished that, it would do that. Even if we got 2 or 3 people out of 10 engaged in consistent mass political education, we would do that. The problem we have right now is 95% of our people are not involved in any organization. That's why I received an ignorant message from someone just the other day, and they were criticizing our constant support for the Cuban Revolution and Che Guevara. And the way they started talking, I knew. So I said, I already know you're not in an organization. You don't know that. I don't know what's your organization. I'm not going to tell you. I'm like, because you don't have one. You know, because the only people that talk like that are people that are not engaged in organized struggle. Because someone coming from the individualistic perspective, then they will be swayed by the arguments of capitalism and imperialism when they say, well, Che Guevara, when he was 23 years old, he used the N-word. Well, if you don't know any better, because all you know is what you come across on an individual basis, that will mean something to you. But those of us who are involved in the struggle for national liberation have come to know the Cuban Revolution through our work. You're not going to do that as an individual. And so because we've come to know them through that work, we know that Che Guevara risked his life in the Congo and helped establish the process of Cuba saving millions of lives in Africa and continuing to do that through their medical internationalism and the international they displayed for over 60 years. And you want us to throw all that out the window and accept your individualist perspective of someone who used the N-word 15, 16 years before they even got involved in obtaining any political consciousness, when we already know you used the N-word this morning and you still expect us to talk to you. So this is why we need political education on an organized basis. A strong people are a people who understand and cultivate their culture and history. And once you're able to do that, that gives you a respect for everyone else's culture and history. You know, we're not anti-white. We don't need to be anti-white. I'm a proud African, and that alone makes me respect anybody. My criteria for whether I respect you is what your position is on standing up for justice. You could be as black as the pavement. And if you're an opportunist like these people advancing these backward views coming from this so-called ADOS movement, then to me, you're an enemy to Africa. You're a part of what Sekou Touré called the anti-people's class. That's what you are. But if you can be white as the driven snow, and if you stand up for justice and fight for justice, then we are political comrades and we can fight together till the end of time. So we're not confused by that nonsense, but we also understand that we have to unite Africa and African people first, because we've had 528 years of colonialism. And anybody that's really serious about supporting African liberation will respect that and won't center themselves if they're not African and view it as some sort of attack against them. I don't center women trying to gain liberation from patriarchy or non-men trying to do that as an attack against me. I join them in that fight. It's not about me. It's just like if you're European, it's not about you, us fighting against white supremacy. Unless you stand with white supremacy, then it is about you. It's about us walking over your chest. So that's what political education can help you come to understand. That's what we're talking about when we say that. And no true movement for justice is ever based on denigrating anyone. We don't have to attack anybody. No movement for justice is based on those values. We never have to do that. In Pan-Africanism, we don't attack anybody. I'll give you 5 days to do an internet search. You can't find one piece of literature where the All African People's Revolutionary Party is attacking any organization, even though a lot of those organizations attack us as policy. We don't do that. Why? Because it does nothing to serve the unity of our people. It does nothing to serve the unity of our people. And we don't have the kind of egos that you have. So we can look beyond the insults coming from people who probably next week won't even be here doing the work they do. They'll find another hustle to make money because that's what they're really trying to do. And so we don't worry about that. We continue and do our work. And so nothing should be based on that. A true movement for justice can only ever be based on principles of unity and uplifting everyone on earth. So anything you see that's talking about denigrating people in any way, form, or fashion, that should be your clue that that's about some opportunism, you all. Plain and simple. So we want to say, again, join an organization. If you want to join the All African People's Revolutionary Party, we certainly welcome you to do that. And we encourage you to go to our site, which is listed there, aaprp-intl.org, and inquire that you want to join, and we will follow up with you. Now, don't be flaky. Don't get fired up because you think it's a sermon and then go sign up and then we contact you and we don't ever hear from you again. You know, think it through, because we're a serious organization and we're not just here trying to engage in people's egotistical desires to feel better about whatever is miserable is happening in your life. We actually want to do something to confront these problems, okay? So please don't waste our time. But if you are serious about wanting to get involved, we would love to talk to you. And so do that. And then I have a blog, and these videos are housed there at betterworld.me, Ajamu Umi's Truth Challenge. We certainly want you to go there. And then hoodcommunist.org. If you're not reading that, you got to read it. Not only have I regularly been a contributor there, but I just recently joined the editorial team for Hood Communist, and I'm so excited because I love and respect all the people who are on that, or from organizations like Black Alliance for Peace, the Ujima People's Party, Black Hammer Organization, All African People's Revolutionary Party, and I'm just honored and humbled to be a part of that. And so they got me doing some essential technical things, and your brother has some challenges there. So I spent the weekend struggling to understand it so I can make my proper contribution, because I don't just, when I talk about political education, I understand people are not used to that. Now that comes easy for me because I've done it so long and so consistently. Reading, writing, those are the things I do very well. But a lot of the technical stuff, not so much. So just like I tell you, you got to engage in political education, read 5 pages a day like we do in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Even if you're not used to doing it, start doing it and you'll get better at doing it. I've imposed the same principle on myself regarding this technical stuff. I spent all day today trying to learn some things I need to learn, and I made a lot of progress. I still have some work to do, but I made a lot of progress, and it was difficult, but struggle is always difficult. Like Frederick Douglass said, there's no progress without struggle. I knew it was going to be difficult, and I'm not done. I'm going to have more difficulty. And I'm saying bring it on, because I want to get better. I want to get stronger. And political education is the way we get better. So look at all these sources, you all, and join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And if you don't do that, join some of the other organizations I just mentioned: Black Alliance for Peace, Black Hammer, Cooperation Jackson, Nation of Islam. Join all those organizations. Whatever one, we're not going to argue with you about which one. Well, I don't want to join the Nation of Islam because I like bacon too much. Well, then start the I Like Bacon Too Much organization. And you're going to need political education in the I Love Bacon organization. So contact us and we'll help you put together a I Love Bacon organization mass political education program. And you go out and you organize your love for bacon into liberation against the capitalist system. I'm all for you doing that. So we appreciate each and everybody that was able to join us today. We invite you to come back next week. Next Sunday is January 17th. I call that Doomsday because it's the commemoration of U.S. intelligence's assassination of Patrice Lumumba in the Congo in 1961. And the U.S. intelligence organization assassination of Apprentice Bunchy Carter, and John Huggins of the Black Panther Party on the UCLA campus in 1969. So next Sunday, Shakur and I are going to be talking about that, talking about U.S. sabotage against them, and helping engage that as a political education issue to understand why we can never be for that, and help you understand some of the work we've done over the last several decades in the APRP, because we've had to smash the FBI CIA campaign. And if you disrespect FBI and CIA today, whether you knew that or not, a lot of the reason for that is because of work of organizations like ours and what we've been doing over the last 5 decades. All right. So we love and appreciate everybody. Maintain your physical, mental, and spiritual health. Please stay safe. Please stay strong. But please fight relentlessly against oppression. Forward ever, backwards never. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we will see you all here next week.